So after being in Sicily for 3 weeks, my mainsail had been repaired, my new radar had come in, all on Good Friday, so it was time to say goodbye to new friends and head out for Gibraltar. Of course, the question is, would I make it or not? This is the story of a boy who in his teens started selling sunfish. In his 30s, he sailed with a friend on his Catalina 27. In his 40s, he bought a Hobie 16, which he sailed every year at the beach for a week. Also in his 40s, he bought a Catalina 27, followed by a Morgan Out Island 41. He sailed the Morgan Out Island for more than 16,000 miles until his 60s when he sold it. He then bought a Hobie 21 SE, which kept him happy for a while, but then he bought a Beneteau 50.4, which he started sailing. And he's sailing it by himself. So sailing solo at 70 is me, David Fansler. Only now I'm 71. So I left Sicily on Saturday, the day after Good Friday, and the winds were favorable. As you can see, the seas were running, maybe 3-4 feet, but the wind was good and the sailing was good. While the seas were a little high, I had some visitors in the form of dolphins, so I went up front to see them. This is some footage from later on Saturday. The seas had built up somewhat. There's no audio with this because this is an IP camera that I have mounted on the stern of the boat. But you can see the waves were ripping along. And the boat, well, it was ripping along too. I had a double reefed main that eventually I pulled it down. And you can see that it didn't come all the way down, and I ended up having to go up on deck to finish pulling it down. Fear not, I had on my life jacket and I was tethered to the boat, so my being swept away was not much of an option. Well, good afternoon to you. It's Monday evening, and so I've been on the way now for 48 hours and a little bit. Yesterday was a day straight from Hades. For the first time in my life, I got seasick, and I mean seasick with all capital letters. I could look at going downstairs and just, oh man. I tossed my cookies more than one time, or as we used to say, we had the call of the Buick. It took its toll on me. I kept drinking. I had some pills that my doctor gave me for vertigo, which I suffer from on occasions, and they were for nausea. So I ended up taking a couple of those, and things calmed down later in the evening, thank goodness. I was able to get a good night's sleep. Woke up every hour or so to check on the status of the boat.
Today was a lot better day, not suffering any seasickness. I actually pulled the jib up today, at least what remains of it. I cut the bottom 2 panels off of it because they were shredded all to pieces, and had attached with screws a section I'd cut out that had a big eye in it where the ropes, not ropes, there's no ropes on a boat, they're lines, where the jib sheets attached to the jib. Unfortunately, before I even got the sail all the way up, that had torn all to pieces. So basically I just wrapped the sail, I furled it, which is kind of like on a window shade thing that it would roll up, and gave up on that. Came back, had me a good old nap, and after I got up from the nap, I came up with another idea of a way to attach the jib sheets. First time didn't work, so we tried it a second time, and so far it seems to be doing okay. Now, the first part this morning was done in 9 or 8 foot seas with wind blowing 25 to 30 knots in my face. The bow of the boat normally sits about 5 feet or so off the water, and every once in a while I would look up and I would be 15 to 20 feet above the water and heading downward quickly. Normally it was just a ride. Every once in a while a following wave would be just in the right position and it would absolutely drench me. So I had been baptized in the Mediterranean. Fear not, I was very safe about it. I had on my life jacket, and I had on my tether, and I had it doubled over so I couldn't even stand up. So I had to get around by scooting around on my butt to get up front, and so there was no way I was going to get washed overboard if anything should happen. Like I said, the wind this morning was 25 to 30 knots. Now it's nothing. I'm motoring along, crossing the Med, burning my fuel, but I'm going at a fairly slow pace, 3 to 4 knots to save fuel. The wind's supposed to change sometime tomorrow morning, so we'll see what that does for me if I can continue on. Right now I'm closer to Africa than I am to Europe, which is kind of a strange thought. Never had any intentions of going to Africa, still don't. So I'm trying to stay away from that far enough that I don't feel threatened by it. Not much else going on. My wind instrument has died on me, the thing that tells me how fast the wind's blowing and which direction it's blowing from. And that's kind of an irkance, but it's not the end of the world either. Good Tuesday afternoon to you. It's about 1:30 or so my time out in the Mediterranean. I'm sailing along at a screaming 2.5 knots with the jib and the mainsail up. I did get the jib sort of working. Well, it is working. What I've done is that a piece of sail strap was sent back with my mainsail from the sail loft. Now, sail strap is a piece of webbing that's about 5 feet long, 1 inch wide, with a loop in one end. And the idea is you use it to tie up sails with when you're not sailing. In my case, I took the piece of webbing and stretched it along one corner of the sail and sewed it into the sail using monofilament line, 0.5 millimeter diameter, and 2 pieces of monofilament sewn into between the webbing and the sail, and I did that on both sides of the webbing. So hopefully that will hold together a lot better. It should distribute the load of the jib sheets to the jib far better than anything else that I've tried. It is working so far. I'd like a little bit more wind to try it out with, but that's not happening. And speaking of the wind, by 5 o'clock or so today, according to the forecast model that I have, the wind is going to be changing in both directions and in strength. And because of that, I'm going to have to take a wide loop around a section of the Mediterranean rather than going straight to Gibraltar. If I try to go straight to Gibraltar, I'll be sailing into a very strong wind and waves, and really don't want to do that. So instead, I'm going to be sailing up to the west side of the larger of these two islands that I just spoke of that are off the west side of Italy, and then sailing westward across that little section to what I think will be France. And then between that mainland and a little island called Melicora, then I'll be heading southwest at that point until I come around the corner and be heading more or less west for Gibraltar. Not the ideal situation, but far better than trying to beat my way into wind and waves, or motoring it, that matter. I'm not into motoring as little as possible, so that's part of the reason, and it's just part of the adventure. This is not a pre-planned theme destination that you have to follow the script. You sort of make the script up as you go along. Other than that, there's not much happening. It's very calm out here. I think I'm going to put out my fishing lure. Some tuna would be good.
Well, it's Wednesday morning, and I don't know how fast the wind's blowing because my wind instrument has died, but it's ripping along pretty good. Right now I'm running between 7 and 9 knots with just the mainsail up. The seas are fairly flat, maybe 1 meter worth of swell, but we are making up time. Well, as you can see, we're moving on along. We're doing about 7 knots or so. The wind from this morning died down to absolutely dead calm, and so I said forget it, and I motored for maybe an hour before I caught up with this wind. I was in the middle of fixing lunch. I had some fettuccine with chicken sauce or something like that in it. So I had to come up, change the sails around, and hopefully, fortunately I did not burn my food. Still have my fishing lure out. If somebody catches it, then yay. It's a good day. I'm headed sort of southwest toward Africa, just for a while, and then I'll turn and tack northwest, and I'll have to do that pretty much probably from now to Gibraltar. So the day has turned out to be glorious. A little overcast, hazy, but nice wind. Let's hope it stays. Well, it's Wednesday evening. It's been kind of a gray day all day. Never did see the sunshine. The wind was good this morning for a little bit. It died. I motored for a little bit and caught up with some wind. And then it's died again. We're still skirting the coast of Africa, probably about 40 miles or so. So I'm getting ready to head down and take a shower and start working toward bed. Well, it's been a crazy day. Started off last night with heavy winds and big seas, and by mid-afternoon it had all gone away. It's Friday, and Sydney's going to prom tomorrow. Hope you have fun. Sunset has come. And if I swing this way, that's Africa.
And now a new feature on Sailing Solo at 70, Dave's Fishing Tips.
Do you like to fish? I certainly do. And I'm here today with Dave's Tips on Fishing. Told the guy I was going to the Mediterranean to buy a sailboat. And he says, oh man, I got the lure you need. And he recommended me this lure. And this lure's got a hook the size to catch an orca. Look at that thing. It's got a line big enough for a whale. And I done drugged this thing from Greece to Gibraltar. And I have to tell you, it has been miraculous. I ain't caught nothing. Not a thing. Either that fisherman, professional fisherman, didn't know what he was talking about, or there ain't no fish in the Mediterranean Sea. Now, which do you think it is? You know what's really sad is this thing comes with a really cool case. It fell down. Look at this. Lobo Lures. What does it say? Over-engineered, never overfished. Never overfished because you don't ever catch nothing with it. I tell you what, the only thing this good lure is good for, yeah, take it off that line and throw it into the sea. No garbage can. Let it go. I'm done with that. Yeah. So that's Dave's tips on fishing today. I hope you got something from it, cause I sure didn't. Always remember to wear your PDF, whatever that stands for. Anyway, hey Mary, I got my PDF on. That's it for today for Dave. You know what? I hate being called Dave. My name's David. And that's the end of David's fishing tips for today. Hey guys, I just want to insert something here after my parody ad on Lobo Lures. They do work. Sometime recently when I wasn't looking, I was off the coast of Spain, something grabbed my Lobo lure and took off with it. And I mean literally they took off with it. I had 70-pound test line on that lure and it snapped it and it's gone. So either it was a good sized fish or I snagged a log on the bottom where it was 8,000 feet deep. Not likely. So anyway, Lobo Lures, thank you for your lures and thank you for putting up with my parody. You do make good quality products, and I love your packaging. That's it.
So it wasn't long after Dave's fishing tips. You saw in the background how calm it was. It's changed. It's blowing like snot. I'm running on a double reef main and a flapping jib. I'm hoping the thing's going to tear itself apart and get the heck off the boat. It ain't nothing but a nuisance.
Saturday was a rough day. It was heavy seas, heavy wind, and I ended up with winds going in the wrong direction and ended up motoring a lot to the point that I was out of fuel. I had a choice of trying to sail 145 miles toward Spain or 30 miles to Algeria. I took the latter. As I pulled into the port, the Algerian Coast Guard contacted me and asked me what I wanted, and I explained that I needed a place to stop and I needed fuel. And eventually, through the conversation, he starts screaming at me over the radio and told me that I could not come in there to stop my engine to turn east 90 degrees and go to a port or to a marina that was up the coast. Eventually, I found out that marina was some 50 miles or more up the coast, and it just it was too far to go. It was 12:30 at night. I pulled into a cove and dropped the anchor with the intentions of going to sleep. The boat was rocking so hard there was no way I was going to sleep, and it didn't much matter because a few minutes later the Algerian Coast Guard calls me on the radio and asked me where I am, and they came to me and said, "You cannot anchor here." I asked where could I anchor, and they said nowhere. And I said, "Where can I go?" And they said, "Well, you can go back up to the port that you started from." And I said, "Well, I can't get there because I don't have any fuel and the wind's blowing the wrong way." So they said, "Can you go east?" And I said, "Yes, the wind's blowing the right way for that." And they said, "Well, we can take you east 15 miles to a port there." So we started going down the coast with my sails up, running about 3 knots. And by the time we got to this little port, the sun had already risen on Sunday morning. They pointed to a place up against a concrete wall for me to tie the boat up to, which I did. They then came on board and searched it from one end to the other. They never told me what they were looking for. So at that point, it was time to fill out paper. Well, the first thing that comes out of the commandante's mouth is, "You're in Algerian waters and you're not flying an Algerian flag, and that's a heavy fine." I said I wasn't planning on coming to Algeria. He says, "That's not my problem." So a gentleman that had been on the boat, the radio operator who could speak in English, went and found me an Algerian flag, and I thank him again for that. It was most kind of him. And after filling out all the paperwork and figuring out the boat's registration and everything, they disappeared for a while, and I took a nap. I got up and took down the remains of the jib, and it got to be interesting with all the people that showed up, because this was apparently not something that happened very often in this little fishing village. And more people came and were parking everywhere, and eventually the police came and had to run off people for parking in the middle of the street. And as the crowd gathered, I had finished up more or less the work that I needed to do, and I sat down on the boat and we had conversations. We talked about this, that, and the other, and I had my picture taken with lots of families and young men that were there. There was one gentleman who spoke very fluent English, and he's in the center of this particular picture with glasses on, waving at us. And it was a delightful time. I told stories of what I had done and where I'd been, and he would translate for those that couldn't speak English, and they would ask questions and he would translate for me and then give them the answer back in Arabic. If I had $1 for every time that one of them said, "Welcome to Algeria," I would have been a millionaire. And in fact, I was already a millionaire for the good time that I had with these people. They were absolutely delightful. There was one man who ran a restaurant, and he must have come over several times and asked me, "Can I get you anything? Please, let me bring you some food or drink." They were adamant that if I needed anything at all, to just say so and they would go get it for me. I even had one gentleman come up and volunteer to buy my gas or the diesel fuel for me, which was kind of big because they don't take credit cards. I only had 50 euros, which would buy 150 liters of fuel, and I needed 400 liters. So I thanked him for his offer and said I would take him up on it. About 10 o'clock I went to bed, and 11 o'clock the commandante wakes me up. He's up on the boat knocking to arouse me and says that I have to be out of port by 8 o'clock in the morning. So at 7:30 I was at the fuel pumps waiting for somebody to pump fuel in, but then a Algerian Coast Guard member and a policeman come up and say, "We have to search the boat." So I said, "Okay." So they came on board, and I had to go down with them, and watched them as they searched the boat under the bunks and in the cabinets and everywhere they could think of. And just to have fun, I started pointing out places that they hadn't looked. And it got to be funnier and funnier to me, I guess, all the places that I could find that they hadn't thought of that somebody could hide on a boat. Eventually, someone came along and we put fuel in the boat. Again, the Algerian Coast Guard paid for the fuel, and I thanked them for the 400 liters that they gave to me. The gentleman here with the young girl was the radio operator on the Coast Guard boat from the night before. Such a kind soul, and I thanked him for finding me the flag to save me the cost of the fine, and I thank him again for that and for his friendship while I was there. He hung out for several hours and we enjoyed good conversation with each other. Eventually the boat was full of fuel and I left and headed toward Gibraltar. The question is, did I make it or did I have to stop somewhere else? Well, I guess the only way you're going to find out is to stay tuned for the next exciting episode of Sailing Solo at 70. Only I'm really 71.